All right. Well, hey, we're going to go ahead and start it up. I'll introduce myself, and then I want to just give it over to our speakers here as well. So my name is Ryan Morrell. For those of you that don't know me, I've been here at Kensington. This is my 25th season, believe it or not. I came here in 1996, long ago, and thought I'd be here for a year, right? Just hang out at Kensington for a year, maybe go back to Colorado, which is my home. And so God had other plans for me, and I'm married. I've been married now 21 years, have 3 boys, a junior in high school, a freshman in high school, and we have an 8, almost 9-year-old who's a 3rd grader. So I work in kids and family ministry at the Oregon campus, and my whole career has really been about students and young people. And my passion is obviously showing them who Jesus is, but also working with their parents and helping the parents understand their role as the spiritual leaders in the home. So it's a little of who I am. So I want to turn over to Justin and Jenny next to share a little bit about your story, and then we'll go over to Craig and Nicole.
Yeah, we've been married for how long? 13 years. 13 years. We have 4 children, 3 girls, and then our youngest is a boy. Our oldest is just about to turn 10. We met the first day of college at Michigan State University. Go White. And we had terrible first impressions of each other. And then we kind of started to like each other 4 years later. I liked her for 4 years. She liked me 4 years later. And so in that journey for us, we've had a blast just kind of growing, learning. One of the things that we do, we started on Kensington 12 years ago in student ministry. And then we've had multiple roles, from Jenny being in kids ministry and myself, now the lead pastor at Birmingham.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I worked alongside Jenny. How many years were you in kids, Jenny? How many was that? 4 or 5 years?
Oh, no, like 7.
7. All right. Well, anyway, worked alongside Jenny for 7 years, I guess. It was much longer than we thought, but it was an amazing 7 years. And boy, she was talented. She ran circles around us. She whipped us all into shape. We miss her. She's a great voice for kids. So glad you're doing what you're doing too with discipleship and giving adults a vision for what they get to do with their kids at home. So, by the way, you guys are doing remote learning. Am I correct on this? You guys got how many in elementary school right now? 2?
2 in elementary, 1 preschooler, and JJ is almost 2. So he just is tornadoing through the house while we try to learn.
Jenny, I think I saw a post on Facebook, something, I don't know if it was last week or when was it, something interesting was said in, was it Serena's class? What was that?
Yes, it was the first day of virtual learning, and her teacher asked about pets, and Serena said, well, we don't have any pets because I have 3 younger siblings and they're enough to take care of. So, we agree. Yeah.
So good. So good. That's why we don't have pets too. That's awesome. We have our hands full. That's great. All right, going over to Craig and Nicole. Craig, Nicole, tell us about yourselves.
All right. Well, I'm Nicole, and Craig and I met at William Tyndale College, which does not exist anymore. It was in Farmington Hills. It used to be Detroit Bible College years ago, and we met the first day in English comp, and it was love at first sight.
For her. Craig, you're going to be in trouble after this, man. You really are.
We did get married in our 3rd year, going into our 3rd year of college. We were broke. As a joke, yeah. We worked at Outback Steakhouse together for a couple of years until Craig took a senior high position at Grace Community Church in Morrell, in Detroit. Oh my gosh, I got something. And then we did that for almost 10 years, and then felt God tell us to plant a church. So we did that for almost 12 years, and we've been at Kensington for about a year.
Yep. Yeah, we have 3 kids. We got a 17-year-old, Tobin. He's in his senior year, and we've got daughters, twins, that just turned 13 back in January, wrapping up last year junior high.
That's awesome. And I believe we share a commonality with a young driver, right? We both have 2 drivers. How's that going?
It is every bit of the stress of our lives these days. Our son, he just totaled his first car. Actually, Facebook reminded me several days after I scrapped it at the junkyard with the photo of bringing it home that it was only a year ago, and I gave it to him. So it wasn't his fault. Thankfully, everybody was fine. but it did total the car. So Grandpa went out and found him a new used car, good A to B type of car, and he's already grounded from it because of his attitude. So we're having all kinds of fun days in our home right now.
That's awesome.
It was like life is taking everything away, and Mom and Dad are completely killing all of his joy and fun.
Oh man. Well, you have his best interest in mind, hopefully it learns. So, well, thank you so much for you guys for joining us. I just want to share too, Susan Sylvester's here with us. She's going to be taking a lot of questions, and we just want to make sure you guys down in the chat window, if you have questions you want to ask, make sure you're sharing those there. She might be the only one to see those. Am I correct on that, Susan? You might be the only one to see that. I don't know if it's public or not, but
it is public. So if they just click on the 2 and then scroll through and find my name, Susan Sylvester, they can send it directly to me and I can make sure it gets to you.
Great. Thank you for that. So yeah, if you have questions, we're going to take a few minutes at the end just to talk through and answer any of those. So we've got a couple things we're going to talk through as well, but make sure you get those to her. So just to start, the reason why we're here tonight is we're coming out of this toolbox series where we're talking about discipleship and how to become, just intense followers, more devoted followers of Jesus. And what does that look like? How do we grow with him? And so as a result of that too, in this season, church looks a little different for so many young people. In fact, church isn't happening for so many young people. A lot of kids are at home. Maybe they're following along with our curriculum. Maybe they're not. But what we realize so much is the importance of the important role that parents play. I've always believed this. It's the most important role that happens for the development of a child. And so what we want to do tonight is just to give you tools to remind you of your importance in the spiritual direction of your child. One of my favorite authors, somebody who really kind of is he holds the banner so much for the church and for young people in this country. His name's Reggie Joyner. He says, no one has more potential to influence your child than you. And so that's why we're here tonight, because there's nothing more important to influence our children with than the love of Jesus and how we're walking with Jesus. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. We want to give you tools. We want to give you strategies. We want to give you just thoughts, maybe one takeaway. If it's just one takeaway, it's a great thing. But we want to empower you and equip you with as much as we can to walk away feeling like, all right, my biggest job, most important thing in this world is to walk my kids closer to Jesus. So with that, so to start out, Justin and Jenny, just real quick, we all have, as we come in and we lead our children and we parent our children, actually I'll start with Craig and Nicole on this, as we parent our children, we kind of parent out of our own paradigm of what we've seen and what we've known. And so what I'd love to ask Craig and Nicole is just a little bit of what was your childhood like in regards to how your relationship with God was kind of formed in the home. What did it look like inside of your home and your relationship with your parents? How did they lead you closer to Jesus, and did they? So maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in my house, we grew up going to church, but I think really it was only when I was really young that there was a lot of intentionality outside of actually the building on a Sunday morning. But it was my dad for many years when we were pretty young would have a routine. I'm one of 7. I'm the oldest of 7. So I think this probably started to change after like the 3rd or 4th kid. There's just a lot of us. But he would come every night up to our rooms and he would read the Bible for a few minutes before we go to bed. And I think it especially stands out because my dad's blind. So he would read from Braille. And it was like a whole experience of seeing his hands swipe across the page and being just drawn in. I think especially as a kid, trying to figure out how the heck is he reading with his fingers. But honestly, I think part of my passion for the Bible even today really comes from my dad just really investing that into us at a very young age.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my experience was I too grew up in the church, and we went faithfully as a family every Sunday. I am a pastor's kid, so my dad planted a church when I was 10, and so we grew up. My parents actually, this is on, if I can move this, my parents did these Bible stories, which I inherited and they gave to me when I was older. But we used to do Bible stories together when I was little. And then I saw my parents always doing their own personal devotionals whenever, as I was getting up in the morning, and that they themselves were always doing personal devotionals. So that was something I witnessed throughout my life. But I will say for both of my parents, they did not necessarily witness that in their life. from their parents. So it wasn't modeled to them as something they had seen. It was something that they had committed themselves to. So
Yeah. One of the phrases I think we'll hear tonight, maybe multiple times, is the whole idea of it's caught, not taught, right? And so for you, Nicole, you caught something from them. Craig, you as well, obviously, with your dad, which is really cool. So thank you. All right, so there's that story. So let's touch over Justin, share a little bit of your journey as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't grow up with a family talking about faith. We grew up in Kensington. Around 10 years old, we went to Kensington, and it was my mom who wanted us to get back to the church. And so she kind of dragged us along, and I remember my dad saying, like, I'll tolerate church at Kensington at the old Troy High School. And that was his, like, that was it. But there was no like Bible reading, no Bible stories, none of that in our family. And I would say it was what we call third party people. People like, I actually met Ryan in middle school when I was in middle school. Sorry to date you, man. But I met Ryan when he came on staff as a middle school director. And then in high school, really through the small group I got involved in Edge and the leaders there, I came to faith at 14. And then that really blossomed in the next couple of years. And so for me, my experience though in the journey of watching my parents grow and flourish in their faith later in their life has been like stunning, because they didn't grow up with that. Like there was some bitterness there. There was some hurt from the church on their end. So they didn't bring me into it until much later. And then that journey unfolded. And now we sit and talk about things that I never thought I would be able to experience as a family. And that's later in life. And it's been a joy for us.
I think for me, similar to what Craig and Nicole shared, our family were faithful church attenders. So we went every day growing up, and I was in a Christian school through 8th grade. But I would say for me, making my faith my own, like really taking it personally and trying to figure out how to walk with God in a personal relationship, a lot of that didn't start for me until later adolescence and even into my time in college. And my time at Michigan State was very formative. And so I think for everybody that's listening, watching, something we want to encourage you with is that you can walk with God and you can disciple your kids, whether you had a great upbringing or not, or whether you had a great example to follow or not. It's never too late to start. And so being here tonight is just a testament to your desire to want to raise your kids to know Christ. So
that's awesome. Well, you guys, Justin, Jenny, you've always been a great example to me. Is just you help paint a target, and I want to talk about that just a little bit, because you know, I think for so many of us as parents, we sometimes don't know exactly what we're aiming at. You know, you think about so much in life. In our careers, we're aiming at a certain goal in a job, and if you're playing a sport, you have a certain goal that you want to get to, or level you want to get to. If you're a musician, you want to learn how to play this piece. But oftentimes with parenting, you know, with the diversity of our kids and the different makeups and characters of each of them, it's really hard to be goal oriented. And so I want to ask you guys that. As I've been just so impressed and inspired by you guys. What are some of the things you guys are aiming at, maybe now, or just what you're hoping to see in the future in regards to the spiritual development of your kids?
Yeah, I would say one of the things like maybe call a larger goal or a overarching goal. One of the things that we always love is to love God, love others, and love yourself, right? Yeah, and that idea, like that's a general principle we want to teach to each of our kids. But what we realized is, as a family, we could bring every family could look differently in their approach to that by their set of values. Like, what do they value most as a family? And so we've really challenged people and ourselves to kind of go, what are your top 3 or 4 values that you care about that drive your family? Like, what are the things that define your family a little bit uniquely? Like, even we put it in our name here, but we even give ourselves a name called the Dub Squad. We want to create our own family identity and how we operate and how we live. And so we started learning that we didn't want to teach our kids necessarily the behaviors of life. Like, behaviors are great, but we wanted to teach them the values that drive those behaviors. And so we've picked a few of those values. We have friends who picked ones like kindness, friends who've picked ones like serving. And for us, we've picked ones like generosity, intentionality, Jesus being a high value of what we bring into our family, and kindness. And so we're looking at how do we celebrate those. One of the things that Orange and Reggie Joyner and his team says, whatever gets celebrated gets repeated. So how do we celebrate those values in our family and our kids when they are living that out with their friends, with their sibling, because we want to point our kids to a value-based life more than a, here are the behaviors, now don't mess up. And then that makes me pull back from focusing on behaviors and just managing behaviors versus going, I want to drive to the heart of the value of who we are and how we live as a family.
Yeah, because if you're managing behavior, if you're kind of in crisis management at a young age, it's probably the crises are only going to get bigger as you get older. I mean, we feel that in our family. Problems are smaller in some ways when they're younger, behaviorally, but it doesn't get any easier. So that's a great vision to get away from behavior and aim towards the values. Jenny, did you have anything to offer with that? Or
I was just going to say, one of the things that has worked well as a result of doing that is it's given us common language with our kids. So, so especially for the older two, when we talk about our family values, they know exactly what we're talking about. When we talk about generosity, open-handedness, they know exactly what we're talking about. When we talk about intentionality. So just one of the benefits of kind of narrowing the lane on your language is that it makes it very easy to talk about with them, even from a young age.
And I would add to that, then it changes our rhythms. So because intentionality is a rhythm, then one of the decisions we make is to go on dates with each one of our kids. And that has to be scheduled, right? So spending that time to be intentional with each one of them, because they're unique and they're different. So learning who they are and how they're wired, I mean, it just starts driving then the rhythm of life that you're living out with your family. And I think that's been one of the things that actually just a side note, is a practical that has been fun for us, is that we actually have something to talk about on our date night when we get that in another 6 months. But on our date night, we can go, how are we doing in these areas and these values? Like, how are we modeling? It's kind of a great check-in for us. And then we can have all the other conversations we want to have.
I love it. Thank you for the reminder on dating kids, because some kids are easier to date, so to speak, than others, right? Too, and especially as they get older. And like Craig and I, Craig, you probably like my 16-year-old. He's gone. He's everywhere. He's gone right now. In fact, I hope he comes home soon because it's getting late. But they're gone. But he still cries for my time. He still yearns for it. So anyway, thank you, Justin, Jenny, for that. And I'll say this too: Justin and Jenny are in it right now with obviously a 9-year-old to a 1-year-old. They are in the trenches and they're leading so well in that. Craig and Nicole here are no, I'll give you total thumbs up, but they are humble too. Craig and Nicole, you guys have left that younger season. You're now in the teenage years, and that's kind of why we wanted you guys here, just as you look back. But give us a little bit of goal. You can paint a picture of what you aimed at before. I think you shared some great stuff of what you learned just from a great leader in our country, great spiritual leader, Andy Stanley. So give us a little bit of that, Craig, just what's been driving you guys.
I think, the Pharisees in the Bible had, 613 different laws they tried to live by. And I think there was a season of time in my life where I wanted, as our kids were younger, I wanted, like, everything had to be perfect. And when I would think about them as a discipled person growing in Christ, like, I think in my mind, I developed this unachievable list, kind of like the Pharisees, where it was just ridiculous. Everything had to be perfect and everything had to be right. And I think what became freeing for me a little bit later on was when I really just grabbed onto 3 things. The third that really became language for me only in the last year. And then I think out of those, there's values that come. But really for us, the 3 things that we want to have happen and develop in our kids, similar to you guys, Justin and Jenny, number 1 is a genuine love for Jesus and a love for his scriptures. And for us, those are both so important. Like, there's so many, I think, even friends that we have and peers around us that love the Lord, but there's just this disconnect with the scriptures, and you see the impact of that in their life. And so we really want our kids, number 1, to love Jesus and to love his scriptures. The second is we want them to love each other, which probably sounds simple, but it helps how we parent, the situations we create, what we do with our free time, the things that we say no to, and the things that we're willing to fight our kids on. Like, there are just certain things, like especially even right now with our son at his age, he wants to be out with his friends all the time, like you're saying, Ryan. And I would never tell my son, we're going to go out on a date, bud. I'd get punched in the face. We have our routines, we have our moments, but he wants to be out with his friends. He wants to be out doing his thing. And we just keep reinforcing, no, dinner. You're here for dinner. You're not skipping dinner, because we want you to love one another. Or when they're all fighting with each other, that's one of the things that we will drill back into that conversation and go, hey, at the end of the day, you have each other. Like, you're always going to be family. So how you treat each other now, that's going to affect the rest of your life. And if you ruin that relationship now, it's ruined. So that's a second huge value for us. You have to love each other, and that determines a lot of how we parent. So here's a third one, and this became more of a recent adaptation for us. It was listening to Andy Stanley. I think back in the early part of the year, he and his wife were at a conference I was at, and they asked him, they said, what have you done to disciple our kids? And he actually said, nothing. He goes, we don't disciple them. He goes, here's what we do. We've taught them to love Jesus, which I'm like, all right, that's what we're working for. And he said, and then he said, and here's the biggest thing that we have tried to do in our home is we want them to enjoy us so much that when they don't have to, they'll come back and visit. And so, and I just thought, wow, it's so simple, but it's so powerful, because it determines, again, how we interact with each other, the fun times we create. Like, I want my kids, as they keep getting older, when they hit the point that they don't have to come back home, that they want to come back home, that they want to be around us, that they want to be around each other, that they want to visit. And I think if we can create that, we're creating something healthy inside of our home that does more of that kind of caught and taught type of thing that you were talking about, Ryan. So I think those will be like the overarching ones, but I think Nicole would say there's probably very specific things that we're also in that constantly reinforcing and targeting.
Yeah. And I mean, so I'll tell you that for me, I feel like parenting doesn't always come super naturally to me. So I feel like I've had to really look around for parenting resources. Even though I'm from a really large family, I feel like I personally had to go and look for the resources that I needed to have the strength to parent the way that I wanted to parent. And so one of them has been a ministry called Fearless Mom. And so she walked through a lot of the stuff of creating like vision statement and walking through your goals for your family and kind of who you want your children to be. So five characteristics for mine were, I wanted adults. So the whole goal, right, of parenting is adulthood. Adults who are honest, hardworking people, who are respectful of others. They take responsibility for their actions and they don't make excuses. They love Jesus and his church and want others to know him. And they put others first before themselves. So those were like 5 things that for me were like ways that I was going to raise my kids.
Well, and I would say like our kids are accustomed enough to these being values in our home that one of the regular things that happens with our son, like it just happened a couple hours ago, is that one of us will start a conversation about something and he'll sigh and go, "Oh, is this another life lesson?"
Yes, it is. Well, they're watching you too, so they're catching the lessons of how you guys are living your life. So I just want to mention, thank you so much for sharing that, Nicole. Just with I think Susan is going to just copy the Craig, the Andy Stanley thing you mentioned. I actually went and researched that. I listened to that message, a podcast of his about 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago. And just so y'all know in the chat, I think Susan's going to put that in there. If you want to hear that message from Andy and his wife, I believe it's Sandra. Am I right? Am I correct on his wife's name, Sandra? Just how she speaks about her children. It's just wonderful. So she's going to post that in there. If you guys want to click on those, it's a great listen in the car. Whenever, if you want to block out your kids and put in your earphones, listen to that. You'll be a great parent because of it. So, but hey, I want to keep us moving. And Justin, Jenny, I want to skip down just to the question right now, just talking about if you could connect with early childhood parents. We got a lot of our early childhood parents with us tonight, birth through 5 years old. Justin, Jenny, what is some advice you would give them? What are some things you look back and say, gosh, I'm happy with how this went, or if I could do this differently, I would definitely change this and how we parented. What are some thoughts you'd give to those younger parents right now?
I think the first thing I would say is to let your kids see your personal pursuit of Jesus. So let them see you reading your Bible. Let them see you praying, opening your journal, doing a devotional, whatever that looks like for you. And not only that, but invite them in. And that was an adjustment for me as our kids kind of moved into toddler and preschool age. I wanted like my time. I wanted it to be just me. And so this was a shift for me in saying, you know what? No, come and climb up here right on my lap and let me tell you about what I'm reading and what God is teaching me. Here, grab a pen and you can scribble in my journal while mommy's writing her prayers on this side. And looking back now, because, you know, Serena will be 10 in a week, and she was the first that I really had to make that adjustment with. And now, like, those journals are precious to me. And they are, just a reminder of how our job really is to invite them into the faith journey and show them what walking with God looks like. The second thing I would say is it's never too young to start those spiritual practices with your kids, reading the Bible to them, praying for them, praying over them. The habits that we form earliest in their lives, I believe, really are the ones that stick. And we're seeing that right now. One of the things we started doing, and again, I'll echo what you said, Nicole, some of our greatest parenting things are things that we saw other parents doing with their kids, and we adopted them to our family. But one of those was watching our friends Dan and Amanda read the Jesus Storybook Bible to their kids. And so we started doing that when Serena was a baby. We brought her home from the hospital. And on a night like tonight, where we were preparing to get ready on this, she's leading the rest of our kids through Bible story time. So she's reading, they're acting it out. The other thing we do is thankfuls. We want to cultivate a heart of gratitude in our kids, so they know at the end of the night, everybody has to find something or someone that they're thankful to God for today. And like I said, she walked them through that tonight. Is that every night? No. Is it sometimes with a begrudging attitude? Sometimes. But for the most part, those are things that we started nearly 10 years ago, and they are still rhythms that are important and part of our family. So I would say that.
The other thing we've been adding as our kids have gotten older is adding them into a bigger purpose. So we decided to do Hope Water Project, right? And go on the family runs, and they participated, and they, even during this virtual one, they laid out the map of how they were going to run by each one of their friends' houses, a lot of whom aren't part of their faith journey yet, right? They're from their public school, but they're sharing with their friends, hey, we're going to come by, this is what we're doing. And they're inviting their friends into a greater purpose with them. And so we've been just trying to cultivate that in our family, that there's a purpose beyond ourselves. We do that even through our generosity value of, we have 3 jars in our home, a give jar, a save jar, and a spend jar. And they get to choose what they give to. And we don't tell them what to give to. They get to decide how they want to be generous. And it's been fun just to find different ways to do that. And so we're always looking at the same time of how do we integrate those values into that everyday kind of rhythm, and then celebrating that and speaking that into their identity of like, this is what we see in you. And again, I'm going to reiterate what Jenny said on one thing of the Jesus Bible story. Like our 2-year-old, not even 2, he knows, like, he points at Jesus in the Bible, Jesus Storybook Bible, and like he's commenting on what Jesus is doing. There's this one picture where these guys are arguing, and he goes, and then, but there's a girl in the same picture that's sitting with Jesus holding some flowers, and he goes, and he knows the difference of the two. So he's seeing that. And he's seeing those stories. So just integrating that early and often has been part of our journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I just want to just reiterate too, the caught not taught thing, the thing you said with Dan and Amanda. Jenny, such a beautiful picture. I can echo too in my own life, just seeing my father. I've shared this at every baby baptism. You guys have heard me share it at Rock Your Family, but getting up in the middle of the night as a 12, 13-year-old boy, going to the bathroom at 4:30 a.m., walking to the bathroom and seeing my father on his knees praying in his study, 4:30 in the morning, and just being blown away by that, because no 12, 13-year-old boy is getting up at 4:30 in the morning to pray, right? And just that has just stuck with me so much of my life. And I caught that vision from my father. Not a perfect man, doesn't have all the answers and have it all together, but just the example he set in that, such a beautiful thing. So, for those earlier years, vision for that. I want to kind of go over to Craig here as you look back, just coming out of that season that you guys were in. You just came out of those elementary years just a little bit ago. Advice, thoughts that you would give to parents of elementary age children?
Yeah, from elementary till now, I think the one thing that I would say is more important than anything is just consistency. Whatever it is, whether it's we're going to read the Bible at night, or we're going to pray together, or we're going to have a jar at the table to talk about stories of God showing up in our lives. I mean, we've done a lot of things. And I think early on, we wandered away from the pressure to find the magic thing that would get our kids to love Jesus and grow spiritually, and just realized there's no magic bullet. It's consistency. And consistency means whatever it is, it's going to change. And for us, it's changed from season to season to season. But I would say some of what, you guys are talking about, Justin and Jenny, were some of our natural rhythms early on. And Nicole is really one of the best at this. Is every night there was this bedtime routine where we'd all go up and she would read to them, and we would have time in the Word. We'd have time in prayer. She would always sing with them. It was a whole experience at night. And I think even just that time became like precious time together, and also just to reinforce values, some that we talked about, like loving each other, bringing the Lord into those moments. So those are natural, but they even got, even prior to being the age they're at now, I think 5 years ago we started the journals, probably?
Yeah,
like
this summer.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, we actually, I'll show them to you real quick. We bought journals for all 3 of the kids. So everybody's got their own journal. And I started laying out just different books of the Bible. And I would try to pick books of the Bible that I thought would best resonate with their personalities, and that they would get the most out of knowing them. And I would give them 1 to 2 chapters every day that I wanted them to read. And when we started doing this, it was in the summer. And I would give them a form that I wanted them to follow. So basically that form was 3 or 4 questions I wanted them to answer. Like, who was in the story? What was the story about? So very simple things. And honestly, I didn't care what they wrote down. There was no right or wrong answer. I wasn't looking for deep things or light things. I was just looking for them to engage with the Bible and realize that even at their age, they could, and that they could start to get something out of it. Because I think one of the things that becomes dangerous is that we think of the Bible when we read it as too difficult, and so we put it down. And I think the Bible is like any other muscle that we have to develop. Over time, you get better at it the more you read it. And I wanted my kids to realize that they didn't have to be Bible experts, but they could start to see things in this book that they could understand and they could make sense. And most of all, would apply to their lives and speak to them. So that's been a big thing for us, is driving them to their own personal time in the Bible after they kind of moved out of the age of needing us to walk them through kind of holding their hand.
Well, and I think a lot of people have been doing this during COVID, but our family, I think for years and years, even when the kids were really little, spent a lot of time in nature. And that even took them away from screen time a lot, was just spending a lot of time outside. We went to we have family out by Walcott Mill, which is out in the country. And we would spend a lot of time just out in God's nature, talking about spiritual things, just doing temperature checks on our kids to see how they're feeling, how they're doing spiritually.
Temperature check has a whole different meaning today, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, had to go with it.
No.
All right, keep going.
But I think that's part of even just continuing to keep a temperature check on how your kids are doing and how they're feeling and how they are walking and journeying with Jesus, and even learning how they're relating to the Lord differently than maybe you are. Everybody, I think, has different almost love languages with Jesus. I think learning how they relate to Jesus maybe differently even than you do.
So true, because so much, we think that our kids might process Jesus the way we do, and sometimes we don't do a great job of allowing them to see all of those different languages, and we will be literally talking French when they only understand Spanish, so to speak. And so it's so critical to understand the nature, the love language of your kid, also the pathway, which, that's a whole nother subject, but our kids are going to connect to God. Some are going to go through music, some are going to go through nature. Some are going to go through intense Bible reading. They're all going to have different ways to go. And if we just force one way upon them, they're going to get frustrated and think there goes interest, right? So thank you for that, Nicole. That is very good. I want to just echo too, like I've said this before, in an inconsistent world, the best thing we can be as parents is consistent, because so much as they get older and older, everything's starting to look inconsistent. Friends are inconsistent. The messages that they've heard their whole life, the values that they thought were consistent in home, don't do this, don't say this, suddenly it all appears inconsistent. And so for us as parents to be consistent is one of the most important things that we can do. So thank you for that. Hey, we get just one more thing before I want one final question before we get into the questions with everybody. And Justin, Jenny, I'll bounce back to you on this. What are you winning at right now? Give me a win right now. What's winning in the Warrens world right now in regards to your family and God?
No. Can I share a couple?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I shared the story, just the habits and the Bible reading, at least with our kids, has been huge. I would say a couple of things, and I'm thinking primarily, well, I'll do this. Okay. One of the things that's winning right now is storytelling. And here's what I mean by that. This summer,
which we stole. We were inspired
yes.
by the McGlashans on when he spoke during COVID. I was like, that is an amazing idea. Jenny and I were like, man, that's amazing.
Stealing it.
So we're stealing it.
So just telling stories to our kids about our life and our journey and the significant moments where God has really shown up or been faithful. We saw it this summer with really both sets of grandparents, but it has become like regular when we're spending time with them, where the kids are saying, tell us a story at bedtime. Now, sometimes I think it's my oldest's way of trying to stay up later, where she'll be like, so Mom, tell me a story. But I'm taking those opportunities to share with her. Like just last night, I told her about the first mission trip I went on, the first time that I got to go somewhere out of my comfort zone to see and serve other people. The other night, I told her about my first small group Bible study that I was a part of and why it was important to me. And so I would say just be intentional. Tell your story, your faith journey to your kids. And it doesn't have to be huge, monumental, giant moments. It can be just in the everyday. You know what? I felt this nudge earlier today, or, when we were in the car the other day talking about such and such, whatever it is, but tell those stories. The other thing I would say, and I don't know that I would say we're winning at this yet, but it's very important to me, and I'm praying about it very often, is the idea of third parties. And Justin mentioned this earlier, but I think anyone with kids like over the age of 8, we can agree that the outside influence becomes important as our kids get older. And so for us, what that has meant is being very strategic about inviting and encouraging other adults into our kids' lives who are their encouragers, who know and love Jesus, who will point them back to what is true, and whose beliefs and values align with ours. And so there are a handful of women that are popping right into my mind right now, and they know who they are because they already are influencers and speak into the life of Serena and Gabby, especially. But I would say praying for those people and even having an intentional conversation to set them up, like these are going to be go-to people when they don't want to hear my voice as much as they start to grow.
Yeah. And I would even say, even for me, one of the things that I've been telling stories of, because now Serena's at the age where I had this moment where I realized she knows more Bible stories than I did by the time I was like 15. She knows more about the Bible than I did, like when I came to faith, right? And so I've been telling her about even my journey of doubts. I've been telling her about my journey of like things that I struggled with or I learned later, and things that I celebrate the fact of what she's already known, right? And same with my 7-year-old of like, man, I'm amazed that you know this about this story and you can recall this because your dad, like this is even the way I'll do a story. Your dad didn't know that story till I think I was 17 years old. Like I had no idea who these people were and what significance they led in their life and the faith journey that they had. And you already know it now. Yeah,
that's so good.
So,
yeah. I just say too, you bring up just an important component too, just authenticity that we as parents have to they know what they need to hear the struggles. They need to hear the failure. They need to hear the times where it didn't go well for us, because it's not going to go well for them all the time as well. So yeah, to be honest about what you don't know, what you did know, or what the struggle is right now is such a big component of that. So thanks, Justin. Craig, Nicole, what's the win right now in the McGlasson home?
I'd like to say I'm winning with my daughters over what's appropriate to wear.
Oh, really? Oh, because I'm already failing on that one. Tell me more.
Hard work.
Yeah, it's hard to say. To be honest, it's hard to say winning. I think the trajectory is towards the win on some things. But I would say, I'll pick on Toby. Maybe you can come up with one for the girls. But I would say for my son, one of the areas I feel like we're seeing some trajectory of win right now. And this goes back to part of our nightly routine. For years and years and years, one of the ways that I pray over him and have prayed over my girls as well is, and I don't always say the exact same thing, but one of the things I repeat often is, it's just asking God, would you set my son apart from the ways of this world and for the ways that you have for him? And I've always tried to just enforce to him that there's a way that the world will lead you, and there's a way that God wants to lead you. And there's a distinction between the two. And it's interesting to see him right now. He's wrestling in a really real way, and in a very, some days a very difficult way, between what he sees in his friends, their values, the way they live their life. Even some of his friends that go to church and are, the quote unquote Christian friends, that they're just living in very destructive ways, and that's just eating him up. And I'm watching him wrestle and battle through this. And I think it really has only been in the recent that it dawned on me, because I feel the angst and the frustration for him in that. And some days I get frustrated at him even, because he can almost lean what feels a little judgmental to me. And what I think I'm starting to realize is, holy smokes, God's doing that. Like he's creating what I've prayed for. There is an understanding in his mind that there's a way of the world that leads to death. It seems right in our own eyes, right? So the scriptures say, but it leads to death. And there's a way that God will lead you. There are plans that he has for you, and there are plans that the world has for you, and they're not the same. And it's just so cool to see that God is forming that distinction in his heart and in his mind very clearly right now.
That's great. Thank you. Nicole, what win for you?
Well, to be honest, I feel like we're in that middle ground with this age in probably for people who are in this 13-year-old land. It's an interesting time. And even in the perspective of us switching churches this past year, I almost feel like we wouldn't be in this place if we had almost switched churches during this time frame too, because I feel like they lost even like a little bit of their friend group this past year. And then with COVID, they've lost there's a lot of their school friends. So it's been kind of an very interesting junior high year for these girls. But I feel for them, like their win has been that I feel like when they have received correction or things, that I feel like their heart has not become hardened towards us, that their ear is turned towards us, that they have a softened heart. And that gives me hope. It honestly gives me hope for the coming years, that there's a teachability there.
Yeah.
But there, it's interesting too with twins, because people, I think they see them and they're like, oh, they're the same, and they're very, very different. So there's a lot to be seen in what direction they will both take. But the one thing that I was going to say that even was just coming off of a little bit of what Jenny was saying, and I think this is so good, even as I look at our kids, is one thing that has struck me in raising children is just that we all need a renewed heart. And when we look at our kids and how, when I'm like even relating to my kids and disciplining them and talking to them, I look at them and think, I'm a person who is a sinner saved by the grace of God, and so are you. And there have been times when I've said, your mom, she's just a sinner saved by the grace of God. You're just a sinner saved by the grace of God, and we are both here in the need of God's grace and mercy. And so we've been able to have like really good conversations now as they're getting older, to have those good conversations where it's like we're both honestly in some equal footing.
Yeah.
And I think that's been really good.
Good. Well, awesome. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to keep with you guys on this next question because we've got about 7 minutes left. We really want to stick to the 10 p.m. So we know it's getting late, but we want to honor that time. Let's talk real quick. Question regarding technology. Craig, is the phone really off at 7:30? I mean, is it really? It is. It's off. All right. So what wisdom would you impart? Because, you know, these things are real. They're coming at us. You know, I thought my first kid didn't get one until end of seventh, maybe eighth grade. My second child wanted it, and we kind of gave in at sixth grade. Regretted that a little bit. Give me what are some quick thoughts, maybe a minute, just here's some quick thoughts regarding technology, things that I would want everybody to know.
Yeah, I'd say I started off early on trying to mimic a friend of mine that had a chart of how many hours you could be on the phone, and then you'd move the magnet when you took it to the on time, and then you'd move the magnet to the off time when you were on. I'm like, that's just stupid. I couldn't do it. I'm like, it's a full-time job just monitoring that. If you can do it, you're amazing. I couldn't do it. So what I did is just tried to lay down some of my expectations when they did get devices of how much time they could be on it, what they could be doing with it. And I told them, I said, I'm going to give you the opportunity to police and monitor yourself in terms of how long you should be on it and shouldn't, but I'm watching. And if you can't be appropriate with it, then I'll do it for you. And so that's why we're at the 7:30 time right now, is because there's been too much time where they pick it up and they don't put it down. And so I'll come in and I limit the time. So their screen time literally shuts off at 7:30. They think I'm an absolutely horrible person, and I'm good with that. The other rule I would say, this is just us, but I think it should be everybody, non-negotiable for us in our home, no social media. Our kids don't have it. The only thing our son has is an Instagram account, and I even have been a little second guessing that, but he only uses it because he's a musician and a wannabe philosopher. So he's always posting his deep thoughts of Tobin and clips of him playing music, but that's it. And our girls have absolutely nothing. They will get nothing, and he'll get nothing else either. And with the girls, it's been more of a battle with him, but we're sticking our guns on that. We've just seen too much destruction from that. And I could talk longer about it, but those are some of the things I'd say about social media. Give them the chance to fail. Give them the chance to succeed. And when they can't, that's when you got to step in and you've got to put the limitations on it. But we've tried to walk them through making good decisions with it, as opposed to just simply making them obey what we say.
I will say too, our friend's daughter had a situation at school where she was almost expelled. So it kind of helped our situation.
Yeah, it's great to have a huge example in front of you like that, right? So, Justin, Jenny, just with the youngers, wisdom to impart about younger children in screen time, what would you say?
Give them social media at 5, right? Right. That's it. No. We have a phrase that we've been using, especially this, because it's harder. It's a lot harder right now. I'll tell you that much. With them being on virtual school, I have an app that monitors and filters. I would just say this: anything you give a child, regardless of any decision you make, I would heavily suggest a filtering option. I've seen accountability option. I don't believe in that fully from a website aspect. I go with a filter where I filter out everything that's inappropriate, one, because of statistics. For me, one of the things about technology and screen time is anything that is computer or mobile, the average age of a kid stumbling into something that they shouldn't be seeing is 8 years old while doing homework. Right? So that's the reality. So giving them that is not wise, in my opinion, where they can do that without a filter to block that. So anything we have that they access is filtered, and then we limit their time. It's been really hard though with school stuff, but I let my daughter convince me that she can have a phone when she turns 15. I said, you win.
Justin, real quick, I don't know if it was Serena, but what was her, she's kind of called you out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great. Thanks for bringing me back to my worst moment ever as a parent. Yeah, I'll share this for everybody. I've told this from stage, but one of the things I had to check my heart on is how I use my phone and I was engaged in work. because it's important. Like I'm important and I need to do it. And so for me, what I ended up doing, my daughter drew a picture of our family, and she drew a picture of my phone because that's what she saw me on the most. And so she would see the back of my phone, and she was about what, 4 years old. I'll tell you, that was a gut check real quick, and challenged a lot of my mindset. And then Jenny calls me out if I go back to that place.
Yeah.
I would also say, at least in our house, screen time is not, it's not a right that they have. It is a privilege that they can earn. So outside of school, which we have to allow right now, they have a list of things that they got to do before they get free screen time. And those things include some chores, which are responsibility. That includes outside time. It includes physical exercise. It includes doing something quality with one of their siblings. So like playing a game, building Legos, doing something else. And it also includes reading. And that's, I don't know if I got them all, but for us at least, like it's something, it's not just something you assume that you deserve to have whenever you want it. So
Nicole just whispered in my ear that she's going to give me a chore list before I can get on my phone.
It's like spend time with me.
Hey,
That'll be the
can I
number
just add to, just so it's clear, we also have put, since the earliest days, all of the filters on the phone too. So in case that was unclear, it wasn't just free reign for all. Yeah, surf whatever you want on Google. No, we put all the filters too.
Good luck.
Hey, Ryan, I just want to add, by the way, if anybody still has Netflix, one of the things that's worthwhile to do with it is to watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is, if you've not seen it, you might actually throw your phone away after you do. But especially if you're a parent right now, you need to watch it for just an understanding of what our phones are doing to our brains, let alone our kids. It's a must watch.
Yeah, I need to.
Ryan,
Yeah.
so I sent you some questions
Yep,
from
I've got 'em.
people that are watching. Did you?
Yep, got him.
All
I was
right,
going to go right
cool.
there to that one. So yeah, one that's on here real quick is what's the best way to explain? One of you take this? What's the best way to explain to kids why bad things happen? Craig, you both are youth pastors. You guys have all done this. Who wants to take it? I'm going to set it at the net.
Man, I don't know if there's a best way with anybody to explain that. I think the best way is to be with people in it and to admit that you've been hurt and confused by God too. I think probably the first time Tobin ever, where's he at? He's actually in the other room. First time he ever like experienced real frustration and hurt, our dog had to be put down. And so he was young enough that when I explained it to him, like we're taking the dog to, to the hospital, blah, blah, and I come home without him. And I tried to do the dog, heaven, Jesus thing. I'm like, well, it's kind of like, he's in heaven and maybe he's with God thing. And it's horrible theology, but I was trying to comfort my little boy. And so then he goes, well, did you take the dog to the vet? I go, yeah. Did you take the dog to Jesus? And so I say, well, I mean, I guess sure, in a way. And then he changes and he goes, how'd you like it if I took you to Jesus? Yeah.
Say that. Don't make that crap.
So he's
listening to you.
whole moment. So, but I think honestly, it's funny because he's standing here as I'm trying to explain this. I would say in the moments where, why do these bad things happen? I think I've just been honest with him that I don't have an answer. And what I do have is experiences where I've had to sit in the middle of some really hard things and let God speak to me in them and let God lead me through those and let God give me his comfort and reinforce to my kids that greater than God giving answer to bad things is giving comfort in the midst of them.
That's great. Awesome. Okay. Next question. Jenny, I'm going to fire this one to you. As someone who grew up in the Catholic Church, but has more recently found a deep personal relationship with Jesus, through many struggles over 3 years ago. How do I now start these things with my kids, who are 7, 12, and 14, and who haven't seen it consistently from the start? What would you say about that?
First, I would say it's never too late to start. So start today. Get on a website, Amazon, buy a book. What can we suggest? Like, Can you tell me the ages again, Ryan, if you still got them?
7, 12, and 14.
So
Sorry, 7, 12, and 14.
I would say, I mean, the Jesus Storybook Bible, I know it says Storybook Bible, but I mean, it makes Justin cry still. So like that, it's never too late to start. Maybe, I don't know what her current situation is, but we found at least like our mornings are slower right now because we're not fighting to get all 6 of us out the door at 7:45 a.m. So we're around the breakfast table actually for a significant amount of time. So using that time to frame the day, invite God into the day, pray together, having dinner together. Something we do is high-low. Give us a high from the day and a low from the day. And that's usually very telling and affords us the opportunity then to invite God into those moments, to celebrate, but also to remind them of what's true in those low moments. So yeah, I would say it's never too late to start. And I would use the times of day when you're most naturally together. That's one of the things we love about the curriculum that Kensington uses and the organization we partner with, is they provide these beautiful things called Parent Cue. And every week they provide a conversation to have around mealtime, a conversation you can have in the car, a conversation you can have at bedtime, because those are most naturally the times that we're together with our kids. So to whoever you are, I would say, don't be afraid to start. Try something tomorrow. And as everybody has mentioned, consistency is key. So pick a time that's consistent for you and your family and start there.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. All right, Justin, I'm going to just shoot this one to you since we're still with you guys. What ways have you found to help your tiny humans accept that our quote unquote house rules are to honor them and the charge God gave us, particularly as they compare what they can't do with what they see others doing around them? What would you say to that?
Good luck. No, I'm just joking. I think it's a powerful question. And so for us, the way I do it, because of our values, I come back to their identity of who they are. And what I'm always speaking into them is if they're looking to compare to a friend, and because we have that with our kids, like some friends have more freedom. Some, like right now, some of my daughter's friends already have cell phones. So that's why that conversation comes up. And she's like, well, so-and-so has that. And I go, well, this is who we are as a family. And this is why to me, the why is so important. And if you know your why of why that's not part of your family value, and without dismissing another family, just go, this is who we are. This is our identity. This is what we want to create as a family. And so this is one of the things that's outside of that. I just come back to that why, because that's, to me, as my kids have gotten older, I offer more of the depth behind the why. And I go, what, but then I ask them, what do you think about that? How does that frustrate you? Like, be honest. Let them air their grievances, because one of the things I don't want my kids to ever feel is like I'm afraid of their challenge. I actually want them to have a conversation with me and challenge me and be in that with me, because I don't want them to then not ask the question.
That's great. Thank you. One final question. Somebody asked this. I'll go to Nicole. Nicole, how's the journaling really going? Do they really do it? Do the kids do it? Do they enjoy doing it? Is it forced on them?
Well, so the journals are not something they do all year round for the most part. The journals were something that they would primarily do during the summer. And I will say that I think that that a lot of those things are about training, and we don't often learn how to do these things without a little bit of training. And so scripture says to train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. And so we walked them through, this is how you do a Bible study. And so when we did those journals, it was showing them this is how you do it. And the more that they did it, I think the more they did enjoy it, and the better they got at it. So it was something they did over the summers, and it wasn't something that they did as much during school. Although our kids do YouVersion So if your kids do have cell phones, our kids will do the YouVersion devotionals in the morning through the school year. We will see them doing those YouVersions in the morning.
Just like I'll show you, this is an example of one of the earliest ones.
Okay.
Well, I can't read anything. It's just what they're right from the Bible. So like you see, it's very sparse, couple lines written. So I'm not sharing deep dark secrets.
And you didn't like fact check these. He
It
didn't fact check
is-
these.
This is a few years later what it turns into.
Wow.
So of them just sitting and writing. And so there's some days where it's absolutely begrudging. They're like, oh no, I didn't do it. And there's other days where they jump right to it without having to be told. So kind of like you guys were saying, Justin and Jenny, some days it's great. They just do it. Other days they fight it a little bit. But again, I'm going for consistency. I'm not going that they always love it. I'm not going that they do it every day without being asked. I'm going that it's a consistent thing that happens.
Can I'm gonna jump in and say one thing on that too. I think sometimes parents, part of the intimidation of it is they don't know how to walk through the scriptures themselves. Like I'm gonna air that out, because when I was 18 years old, I came to Christ at 14. And I did what I called like the holy flip. I would just flip through the Bible, and if I liked a passage, I read it, or if I thought I started to understand it, I read it, and then I moved on. Right? That's how I read my Bible for the majority of 4 years, unless somebody told me to read something. But at 18, 19 years old, I had a mentor ask me, do you know what you're reading? And I honestly was like, not like really. Like I got ideas, I pick apart things. So one of the things that I think, just to encourage you parents and all of us, is sometimes we can be honest of going, I'm struggling with that, so I need to grow in this area too, right? That's the overflow piece. So there might be when you're asking the question of like, how can I walk my children through it? You might start with a devotional yourself. Like there's things like the solo remix is one of our favorites as a Devo. It gives practical, like here's a scripture to read, here's something to observations and questions, here's some things to apply, and here's a prayer. And you almost start that, like Craig just said, training, but you're training yourself so that you can walk with your children in it. And I think humbling ourselves to go, like at 18, 19, when that person asked me as an adult, like I'm in calculus 2, calculus 3, and I'm answering the question about a Bible. Do I know what I'm reading? No, I don't. So I humbled myself, and then I learned. And that was a huge part of, I just think that's something we all need to be aware of as we walk with our children, that sometimes it's humbling ourselves to learn too, and being honest.
Can I just add that, Ryan? We mentioned this the other night, that we've even started a thing at our dinner table where we were reading Philippians. This was about 2 months ago, and we just boiled it down to one simple question. So maybe this even helps you if you're trying to figure out, what do I tell my kids to look for? And I just said, we're going to read one chapter every night. At the end of the chapter, I want you to answer this question. If that was the last thing you ever read, what was worth reading tonight? So the last thing you ever read was what we just read. What was worth reading tonight? If that's the last thing you ever read. And I think it just forces you to almost have to dial down and look for something worth getting out of it. So I think it doesn't have to be rocket science. It doesn't have to be, theologian background. It's just start somewhere, trying to pull something out of the text. And then last thing I just want to throw to the mom that said 7, 12, and 14. There is a video series out there. It is called The Chosen. You can get it and watch the episode. It is the best video series as I've ever seen on the life of Jesus. All of my kids in that age range were totally engaged with it every time we watched it. Created amazing conversations and just really good moments for us as a family being drawn towards Jesus. So I'd encourage you to explore that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Dave Wilson, every time he came into a meeting for about 3 months, would say, hey, did you guys watch The Chosen? It's so good. Then the next week, hey, have you guys heard of The Chosen? It's so good. And we realized I wanted to, how's his memory? Because he just told us to watch it last week. And he did anyway, but highly recommended. You got to watch it. So
can I tell you, I actually told Dave Wilson in a group about that. And a couple weeks later, he told me I should watch it.
There you go. Exactly.
I told you
He's never shared that, you told him that though. He's never shared that. So, hey, I'm going to close with one thought. And then Justin, I want to set you up with 40 days. If you could just cast a little vision for that, maybe for families, and maybe is there what's the family angle there? So I'll give you a second, but I just want to remind parents too, that we're all broken. We're all flawed. We are all going to make mistakes. There's no perfect, I think we've said like a bullet that's going to just hit it all. And that's where prayer comes in. And so I just, we're going to close tonight. And Craig, maybe I'll ask you to pray for us in just a minute when Justin's done, but just to pray for parents. So as parents, we're praying for each of them. We're praying for each of them by name, because it is, and Susan Welsh reminded me of this, that it covers so much in what we are unable to do. And sometimes we think it's all on us and they're our kids, we hold tightly and all these things, but they're not ours, they are God's. And I think he's going to do a lot more with them than we're able to do. You know, they're ours for a little while, you know. So just a reminder that the importance of prayer every night, every morning, in the car, wherever it is, it's so needed. So anyway, kick it back. Justin, real quick, vision for 40 days of prayer. How would you encourage families to participate?
Yeah, I would say, so if you didn't know, today we are kicking off 40 days of prayer on our website. There is in Facebook social media stuff, there's some downloadable kind of a reading guide. We're going to read through a little bit of the New Testament and some of the Psalms, I believe. And in that process, it's, as we were talking about, it might be a cool way to integrate some of this conversation into your family. The one thing I would say is I love Craig's thought. Even if you did part of it together, right? Maybe you didn't read the whole thing together, but you individually were doing it. But as a family, you picked that psalm every single night at the dinner table. Would be a wonderful way to walk with your children together. And then also, you can always tell your children what you're walking through, right? So if you're like, hey, I'm doing this, if you want to join me, but one thing I'd love to do is invite us to do it, just the psalm every night together. And then ask that question that Craig proposed. If this is the last thing that you read, what was worth it? I love that. I think that's very practical for this season and could be an encouragement. So that's what we're doing as a whole church and staff. And we'd love to have you a part of it. We hope it's an encouragement to you because that's what we're praying for, is we're reminding ourselves where we're grounded in this season of chaos and unknown and divisiveness. And so we want to be grounded in that aspect of Scripture and the passion that it brings out in all of us.
Yeah. Great opportunity again for kids to see, get caught, not taught. They're going to see you being a part of that. It's powerful. And by the way, it's on the front page of the website. Am I right? And probably Kensington social media.
Yeah, Kensington social media would be my best one to go after. And there's even we posted a Facebook group for it as well.
Right.
And
Sam
Jamie is awesome, and he put it in the
chat.
In the chat. Thanks, Sam.
There you go, Sam. Awesome. Well, hey, it's 10:15. We went a little over. I apologize for being so late. Hopefully nobody turns into a pumpkin since it's almost October. But Craig, can you close us out in prayer tonight? And just thank you to everybody who attended. I'll just say this before you pray. We're going to try to do this again later October. We have a tentative date, October 22nd. It's a Thursday night again, 4 weeks from now. We're going to talk about stress and anxiety with the Dr. Jack Wilson. And stress and anxiety and worry and anxiety that we feel as parents, but also how do we also help our kids with that as well. So just so you know, that's coming again in about 4 weeks. So mark that down on the calendar and stay tuned for more details. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Craig, why don't you pray us out?
Yep. God, I just want to thank you that in the time that we've been together tonight, you've been present. You have heard our conversation. You have heard the questions asked, and God, you're even able to hear the things in our heart that we didn't know how to ask or that we didn't want to. That you see the victories and the wins that we feel as parents, and you see the struggles and the challenges. You see the ways that for many of us as parents, I think we wake up and wonder if we're doing anything right some days. And God, you just see all of that. And in that, I'm just mindful of the fact that the number one way you describe yourself to us in the scriptures is as a dad, that you are a parent to us and a father to us. And I pray, God, that we would continue to grow in our relationship with you in leaning into your fatherly heart and care for us, that out of that place, we would know how to give fatherly, motherly, tender, compassionate love and care and even discipline to the kids that you have given us. They are a gift from you, and we thank you for them. And we just pray, and I ask, God, that you would give continued wisdom and knowledge beyond ourselves to know how to love them well and raise them well. That you would watch over, guard, and protect these parents, give them extra measures of energy and passion and joy in this crazy time that we're living in. And I pray in our homes right now, Father, while we're all together, and it only increases oftentimes the stress and the agitation, that you would give peace, that our homes would be places of joy and calm, and that God, you would, through us, you would parent our kids, and that you would draw them to have a heart that loves you and falls for you. God, I pray that the places even wounded in our own hearts by our parents, that you would lean into and heal those places, that we could be people that, again, God, I pray more than anything else, we find ourselves falling in love with your fatherly care for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, everyone. I just want to say a special shout out to Susan Sylvester, too, who was in and out. She did a lot of the details, the hard work behind this. So thank you to you, Susan, for getting us to this place and pulling tonight off. So thank you, everybody, for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself at the church, Justin, Craig, Jenny, as well. Those email addresses are hard to find. And to each of you, thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom tonight. Nicole, it's great to hear from you. Spend time with you as well. And you're a professional. You got to get up and go to work tomorrow morning, right? You got a full-time job in the morning. So
In my pajamas.
in your pajamas. There you go. Yeah. Great to work remote. Well, hey, blessings to everybody. Good night to you. Love your kids. Love Jesus first. So we will see you again, hopefully very soon. Good night.
All right.
Night.